Good evening, everyone. Today I'll be talking about October Revolution as a part of our CAS project for IB program. And our topic, as I mentioned today, is October Revolution, and here's a useful map which we'll be using throughout this lecture. This map is here to present the status of the Russian Empire as of the year 1917, which was a year during the World War I, which represents as the state of the Russian Empire and its territorial loss in this war. As you can see, Russia is not a good situation, and this was not only militarily the case. There were many other aspects to this. Since the Burslow offensive in 1916, Russia had been in a defensive position against the Germans, who have been advancing constantly. And as of 1917, discontent within the Russian people were at all-time high since 1905, which saw the defeat in the Russo-Japanese War. So, our first revolution happened on March 8th, February Revolution. It's known as the February Revolution due to the difference between the Gregorian and Julian calendars, in which, the Julian calendar was the calendar Russia used before they switched to Gregorian, which caused a 14-day leap in their calendar. Anyways, so when the February Revolution happened on March 8, 1917, according to our calendar, surprisingly, there weren't many Bolsheviks in the Petrograd. So, who was there? So, and how was it done? So, when it was happening, Tsar Nicholas II was on his way to Petrograd on a train, which was stopped, and he was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Alexei Nikolaevich Romanov. So he was supposed to be the new Tsar, and as he was young, the regency was offered to Grand Duke of Muscovy, Michael Romanov, but he refused it for personal reasons. It was not a good moment to be a Tsar in the Russia at this time. So, the February Revolution foresaw the establishment of the so-called provisional government under first Prince Lvov and then under famous Alexander Kerensky. And this period can be described as a period of a duality and a period of chaos. Some historical accounts define it a period of 7 months in which Russia had true democracy, and some others define as total anarchy. But in this period, there were two key governing bodies in Petrograd. So the first one, Petrograd Soviets, and the second one is the State Duma. So what's the difference in between these two? So Soviets were governmental bodies, or let's say collective bodies, that were established across Russia, which consisted of workers. And at this time, as I mentioned, it was a chaotic time, and in the Petrograd Soviet, even the burglars and thieves had their representatives, which is a funny fact about this period. But in reality, the State Duma was a structure without any power, and the army was loyal to Petrograd Soviet. And this situation was also a reason why many of the Bolsheviks during their attempts at July days and later in the October Revolution and throughout this period were shouting all power to the Soviets throughout these demonstrations and throughout this chaotic period. So after the February Revolution, Bolsheviks started coming into Petrograd one by one. First it was Stalin, Kamenev, and Zinoviev, and then it was Lenin, who was sent by Germans as an agent to Petrograd to destabilize Russia so they could advance more on the fronts and force Russia to sign truce and a peace agreement with the Germans. And as I said, these people were leading demonstrations in Russia at this period. And this was the case. It was total anarchy in Petrograd, everyone was demonstrating, and basically everyone did what they wanted in this period. As I said, there wasn't really a governing body. So this nature of, let's say, anarchy within Petrograd triggered the events called July Days, which started on 16th of July 1917 and ended at July 20th, 1917. So what were these? Essentially, these events or demonstrations within these days were a group or some protests and demonstrations by Kronstadt sailors, like members of the Bolshevik Party, but without the leaders of the Social Democratic Russian Party, Social Democratic Party of Russia. And this is the essential reason why it failed, because people were on streets, they were demanding a revolution or seizure of the power, but let's say high-ranking Bolsheviks such as Lenin, Trotsky, or Stalin basically refused to support these people. And essentially they were dispersed by the Royal Guards, and then the Constituent Assembly and the Provisional Government and the Petrograd Soviet together ruled on arrest of these Bolshevik leaders who had caused these events, which resulted in Lenin fleeing to Finland and many of the Bolsheviks going into hiding until the Kornilov affair in August 27, 1917 till September 13, 1917. So what is this event? Essentially, Lord Kornilov was a general who wanted to, let's say, save Petrograd from communists and establish a government with, let's say, liberal cadets and conservative members of the State Duma and close the Petrograd Soviet. And he initially did not want to replace Kerensky, but in the upcoming days of the affair, he decided on that. So he was marching with his forces to Petrograd. So, as you can see in this situation, Alexander Kerensky was quite desperate, who was at the time the prime minister. So he released the Bolsheviks from the prisons, and Bolsheviks organized the Red Guards, which were a paramilitary group which was part of the Bolshevik Party. And the event was actually suppressed peacefully, as these groups convinced Kornilov's forces not to continue with what they were doing, and at the end Kornilov was arrested. However, this event and the policy Kerensky followed was the reason why Bolsheviks were able to do the Bolshevik Revolution in November 7th, 1917, because before that they were outside of Petrograd, they were in hiding, and they all had arrest orders on themselves. So from Kornilov affair on, both the people that supported the Bolshevik Party wanted a revolution, and also the majority of the leading Bolsheviks wanted to do a revolution. And they were constantly pressured by each other into finally taking the action, which happened on November 7th. So, how did October Revolution start? So, on November 7th, on the early morning, the Red Guards started seizing important places in Petrograd, such as the post office, the bridge leading to Winter Palace, and other key points. However, it was in its nature, let's say, disorganized and also slow, because the revolution was actually completed, at least the first stage, which was within the Petrograd, after the midnights, and it was supposed to be completed around the noon according to Lenin's plan. However, eventually the little amount of groups that were defending the Winter Palace in Petrograd surrendered to Red Guards that surrounded them, and then Red Guards stormed the palace, and then they arrested the members of the provisional government, and they then declared the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in the Petrograd Soviet. So this is what happened, and how October Revolution happened and the reasons that allowed this to happen. And afterwards, these events led to events known as the Russian Civil War, and after which the Reds won and the USSR was established as a nation. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that you will find my video helpful, and I wish you all good luck in your exams and education life.